What do a coach, consultant, and CEO have in common? Sounds like a start of a bad joke, right? But honestly, it's all about finding out what people really do in their jobs. The stories, the struggles, the coffee breaks, the real stuff that you won't find in any job title.
Welcome to a space where we sit down with people from all kinds of careers, have a laugh, and dive into what makes their work meaningful. Whether you're looking to learn something new or just here for a good story, let us be your guide. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Charlie.
And let's get
Casually Pro.
Bro! Yay!
So
let's go.
Oh my God. Can you tell it's our first intro? But Jeff, we have someone really interesting here.
Oh yeah.
Talk to me. Tell me who we're meeting with today.
She's Lisa Voronkova. I met Lisa a few months ago. She's the CEO of a medical tech company. She's a very driven, passionate, and authentic person. She's also the mother of 3 children. Isn't that a crazy life? And a dog.
A dog is just childlike. I completely understand that.
I know him the most, right? I know him for 10 years and my kids are super fresh. So, you know.
the dog is more childlike, right? Oh, that's awesome. So I have to be entirely honest. And I was talking to Jeff about this off camera. I spent most of my career in finance, understanding business side things, but you work in health tech. And for me, that's like a whole different realm. There's so many different things that I don't understand about it. But could you just really simply break down what your company does and just talk to us about how cool it is?
Absolutely. So I'll give you an example. Imagine that you're a doctor and you notice some imperfection in what you're doing. So, for example, right now I'm working with a doctor who figured out that there are some flaws in the procedure of colonoscopy. And he came up with a new idea, the idea of new device. And he don't know how to construct this device because to become a doctor, you need to spend 10 years studying and then more practicing, right?
Yeah.
So you need some external team. And so my company has 60 engineers, 60.
Wow.
Well, to be very honest, I wasn't in health tech space all the time, right? We were first industry agnostic, I would say so. So we were doing consumer electronics and so on. But I'm originally from Ukraine, and office is still in Ukraine, even though our headquarters is in New York. So after war started, we were like, okay, what do we do with our lives? We had to reconsider that, right?
Right.
And we decided, we decided we're going to focus on MedTech solely because that's where we can make the biggest impact, according to us. So now we decided to be really selective with projects we're taking, how we're spending our time, because in Ukraine, this is just another measure of life value, I would say so.
First of all, an incredible, difficult situation that you turned into something awesome. So kudos to that, obviously. But on top of that, it's so interesting because there are so many kind of devices that you could have gone into, right? I think in terms of just engineering solutions, there's a whole host of different ways that you can go into the consumer route. You can go into, something for all sorts of different types of operations. But medical devices are some of the most difficult, in my opinion, just because there's so many layers of tape that you have to get through to get them, even into testing, right? That's a thing, right?
Yes, correct.
So why go the hard route? Why go towards something that you have to go through so many iterations and have to prove so many different ways that it is safe for doctors and patients to use instead of just I don't know, engineering a new kind of hardware that's for consumer use that you could just say, hey, we're just going to throw this on the shelves now?
Well, reward is different also, right?
Mm,
If we're talking about consumer tech, going to be in use for shorter period of time, likely, than some innovation in MedTech space. And you're right, because in average, it takes like what, 2 years to bring a consumer electronic device to the market,
wow.
while in medical space, it takes 7 years
Oh my
average
goodness.
to bring
Oh,
this
wow.
device. And I often tell to founders, especially first time founders, that it's not a business. Like it's a scientific job because you need to come up with this idea, construct the
Mm,
device, then fundraise to start clinical trials. You don't have to produce a batch of the devices. You have
wow.
to have like what, 10, 20 devices, and then go into clinical trials to prove that what you have here is like way better than something that is present already on the market.
I wonder how do you make sure that if of the cycle to sell the product is so long, how do you make sure that you're going in the right direction from the start?
Oh, you don't know. That's where science begins.
It's a big
You make
bet.
an assumption. You make an assumption, then you come to the insurance and say, like, look, we assume that what we built here is better. Do you want to give it a try and make this research with us? Invest in us, and then, we would understand it together. It's one of the approaches. Or you can raise a grant from government because most of clinical trials are sponsored by grants. And then you
Wow.
do research and then you have to figure out.
So, and you know what? I think most entrepreneurs can get on board with the idea that every business is a leap of faith, right? But in particular, I feel like there are some niche areas that are just so time intensive, like Jeff said, that it feels nerve-wracking starting the process and saying, okay, well, we're going to devote X amount of capital to it, X amount of time, and hopefully it goes well. But, I won't be able to see that until my kids are from diapers to high school, right? That feels strange. But I'm sure in terms of understanding the reward, right? There must be an incredible sense of satisfaction seeing your product used. I assume to like save lives, if not just make them better.
It depends on the product, but yes. So, Charles, it's all about your goal, right? After all.
Mm,
So, if you have a goal to, I don't want to sound cheesy, but honestly, like just making a better life for your kids, you want to start
mm.
working on some really innovative product that would make a difference. For example, yeah, the name of my company, OVA Solutions. So, they're like first letters of my kids' names.
Oh wow. Oh my
Olga,
goodness.
Valentina, and Amalia. So yeah,
Oh, yes.
I'm always keeping in mind that what I'm doing to bring this like new technology to the world. And so what we typically do as a team, we talk to a customer, to our client. We trying to figure out what is his idea. We do some discovery because sometimes they don't even have to build the hardware. So if it's
Mm,
like a wellness startup, they don't necessarily need their own hardware or a wristband or whatever like they come in with. And then we're putting together this product. We're starting clinical trials together. We are setting up the production line together. We are making sure that they can sell this product in the country they are in. Well, we have the most expertise in the United States, but we also work with European countries,
mm.
with Israel, and so on. That's pretty
So
much it.
the typical customer with who you develop this product is a health professional who found a gap in the market.
I would say there are three categories of our clients. So first one is, yeah, doctor who wants to build a device or a tool that he noticed over time and he has his own money to finance that.
Hmm.
Second, as a startup founder who previously been working in consumer space or like building a software, and then he came up with this idea and he knows how to create a business and he somehow chose medical space.
Mm.
And third category is the founder of middle-sized company who already have a medical product on the market and they want to optimize the production line. They want to build the next version of this device or something like that.
Excellent. So that last part speaks to my language because I work in strategy. And so I think a lot of people miss the middle part where you might not be the bear of the world and you might not be some kid straight out of college just trying to solve a problem to save the world, but you have a pre-established business that you want to run better. You want the product to be a little bit better, a little bit more intuitive or interesting to consumers. And so people like yourself and myself come in and say, okay, well, how can we make this more palatable to other people? I think that that's an incredible service that doesn't get talked about enough. But really, I love this motivation of making the world a better place, right? You talked about your kids. You talked about how you're doing this so that they can live in a world that's a little better than the one that you found. And it's such a valuable ethos that I think a lot of businesses lose track of once they start growing. So, how do you keep that same level of fire under you when you're talking about building these really complex products and processes from the ground up?
And especially when it takes years of administrative and many things to do. Yeah, how do you keep it?
First of all, we decided that we're not going to grow. We're going to limit the amount of companies we're working with. So that
Mm,
allows us, first of all, to be very selective with whom we're working, because we just don't feel like making another prototype that would help someone to fundraise and secure another round and then die in 2 years rather than
mm.
tomorrow as a company, I mean. Um, just because, as I told you in the beginning, we just rethought the entire strategy. Previously, before war started, we were more focused on exponential growth and other things. And then we just realized that, according to my opinion and opinion of my co-founders, it's not something that matters that much after all, at the end of the day. Talking about the time, well, 2 years would pass anyway. So it's either you manage to build something really meaningful over this time, or you focus on the smaller projects, which are also totally fine, again, depending on your goal.
Fascinating. We got into something interesting off camera. You were telling us about some work that you were doing with space. If I recall some data from some space ventures, could you tell us a little bit about that? So something about data that didn't matter.
Oh, got it. Sorry for that. I recently visited an event about
Mhm.
medical technologies in space, and I've been talking to my co-founders that it would be fascinating to work in something like that. So I thought that was a question about it.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Okay.
yeah. So we noticed that most of founders are simply not aware what's gonna happen when they start a medical device company, and then they're getting trapped because they already raised like 2 million, let's say. And then they figure out
Mm,
that they have to spend like years in clinical trials. When you're not generating revenue, you're doing
mm.
research, you're not doing business. And then they cannot just simply give up because they already, have some commitment, or they spend their own money, or they fundraised, but they have to keep going. And it's like a frustrating moment. I
Yeah,
also
I would
noticed,
imagine so.
yeah, right? I was like, that's a trap.
Listen, if I owe someone a ton of money and I can't stop doing what I'm doing, even though it sucks, uh, it- it's going to be a very difficult situation for me. But
Absolutely.
but you know what? I think that speaks to why something like this is so important, right? Because you are incredibly successful at what you do and you love it and you have a passion behind it. But the reason that your company works is because you know how this process works, right? How you can maneuver into profitability even though you're going long stretches of time without revenue.
um, I would correct that because
Mm,
we don't risk that much. My
really?
company is a business. It's not a startup. I'm working with the startups. I have external engineering team. We are not risking that much.
So you're contractors essentially. Well, maybe not.
Correct. To simplify, we're doing research and we're doing prototyping, other stuff. The thing is, like, we've done so many devices that
Mm,
we can do this fast and efficient, and maybe faster than people who are doing like second or first device in their life in medical space. But we are not risking as much as founders. So what I
Mm.
decided to do is to share information openly. I started it
Mm.
in my LinkedIn, but now what we're preparing and we're about to launch this stuff, we're building a No Mercy MedTech newsletter
Ooh, okay.
Aha.
where I have a team of engineers and we purchased a couple of devices. So we opened
Mm.
them and we documented the entire process. And we said,
Wow.
okay, let's take a look what's inside. Let's figure out how they designed that, why it's a good decision, why it's not so a good decision. What do we think about it? How we would optimize that. But also, it's like first category in the newsletter. Second category is we are telling what it takes to build a medical device. Because again, what I told you off camera, well, information now costs nothing. So
Mm.
I actually personally noticed that human mind is not adjusting that fast to changes in the world.
Mm.
Example like TikTok celebrities. So you got used to the fact that someone you see on TV is a celebrity. And then
Mm-hmm.
you see someone all the time, let's say on TikTok or on social media, and they become a celebrity. But you don't quite realize that they put themselves there, right? They were not like selected stars as on TV. So that's just one example. Another example is I don't understand genuinely why to hide information about the space. Because when you try to Google, like, step by step guide on how to build a medical device, you would not find it.
Mm.
But why? Like, information costs nothing. And some people are coming to me and asking me about what is the FDA process and whatsoever, while what really matters is how to get a reimbursement code and how to sell the device into system. But the thing is that
Oh.
first-time founders don't even know that because this information cannot be found anywhere. And when I say information costs nothing, I mean that what matters is expertise. So
Mm.
I don't mind sharing information because I just know that nothing would replace years of experience me and my team have in the space.
Yeah,
All
absolutely.
So,
the all the informations that you just talked about are what you put online in this newsletter, right? Or
correct.
on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Wow. So if you listen to this and you want to create a device, make sure
And
make sure you follow Lisa.
let me just say, side to side here, very, very cool idea. I love the fact that you're putting out this information, but that is one of the coolest names for a newsletter I've ever heard in my life. No Mercy Medical. What was it? It was No Mercy Medical Devices or
No mercy medtech. Yeah.
No Mercy MedTech. Wow. I just feel like that is going to be the name of a band in like 10 years. But uh no, that's super cool. But you know what? I think you're right. So many people really don't equate experience with the actual information, right? I think we can all know how some things are built. A bridge is just wood, metal, and concrete. But if you don't know where to put it, you don't know how to put it together, when to do it, what time of the year, you're gonna have a problem. And so part of what we do, each of us individually, I think, it is a huge component of education. I love talking to founders and listening to their really cool ideas because they have such unique ways to view things. And I think that comes with their lack of experience, right? But then when they come into the actual practice of building the business, of building the product, it's night and day. And you notice it almost immediately in their methodology and how they go about it. So I'm glad you brought that up because that is a huge part of anyone building a business is you might be an expert in the criteria for creating maybe the thing, right? But the business acumen is a whole nother ballgame. It's entirely different. What would you say differentiates a successful founder coming to you with a device versus one that has a long way to go?
I should say the ability to listen, but
Mm,
it's not a very specific criteria because there always should be a balance between your ability to listen and understand the advice, but also take it your way and
mm.
pursue your vision. So it's really hard to tell.
So like a malleability, right? The ability to hear what you're saying and say, okay, well, how do I make this practical for what I'm doing? And really understand that I might not have the right direction.
Also, maybe another criteria is
Mm,
ability to let go your ego, because
mm,
sometimes when we ourselves think it's a good idea, then we are getting too attached to it and we are
mm.
just like unable to hear or get any feedback from space, which is really critical. So,
Right.
for example, I'm working with my team who helped me to put together posts on LinkedIn or create some scenarios for our videos and so on. And sometimes I look what they done and I think like this is not gonna work. Like it's a horrible post. And then this specific post would go viral. So like my
Wow.
opinion means nothing. I should just like embrace it, like and look at the statistics and follow the data rather than my own perception of the world. So for founders, it's the same. Like they have to talk to doctors, they have to understand the industry and not hear what they want to hear, but hear
Mm,
what people are telling them, or sometimes even see that because, um, especially in US, people are trying to be more polite. So when you're asking the wrong question, and wrong question, I mean like, do you think is a good idea? Well, the answer is yes, always, right? No one would say like no, just not to be cocky. But actually, they might think it's a bad idea. So you have to figure it out by yourself.
Well,
And to do
so what's
so,
the
yeah,
what's the good question then?
was the good question. Ask the person how they're spending their day and how they're doing, let's say if we're talking about some tool, how they're doing a procedure and what they think is off in this process. So to understand the person better. And then ask like, what do you think might make it easier for you? And then if they would say something related to what you're building, then probably you're building a good thing.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point too, because you don't get anything from is this a good idea? Yes or no. Either one doesn't give you any value from the information that you glean from it, because either you're very polite and you're not guiding them down the right way, or you say no, and you're a little bit of an asshole. But ultimately, it still doesn't tell you what you need to know about why it's not a good idea. So I think talking about the process gives you a whole host of information. And honestly, it also goes to glean how dedicated someone is to understanding the parts that they don't get, right? Um, like I said before, I worked in finance for pretty much all of my professional career, and I still don't know about MedTech, but I am so incredibly curious about learning how do companies like that work. And so in doing that, I could probably increase my business acumen by saying, okay, well, now I know that the big part of the process is not just going through hoops, but understanding that it's a massive process that involves a lot of really complex operations. Um, that you don't see value from until the end of the day. And then you have interesting third party workers or third party contractors that can help bridge that gap of I know and I don't know. So that only benefits someone by seeing what they're willing to learn or what they know and then filling in the gaps there.
Sorry, I would just correct you, Charles.
Mm.
I think that founder should figure it out by ourselves. So
Oh, okay.
especially founders with an engineering background, they
Mm.
often trying to build the product and spend most of the time building the product. While I personally think that this part can be easily outsourced to someone like me or my colleagues. What founders
Oh.
should do is to figure out how to feed this innovation into the care pathway. Because once you bring this device to the hospital, It would affect not only the specific operation that you're doing with this device, but also next steps, right? And you need to figure out how to smoothly fit it in and educate everyone involved in the process, and also how to bring it to the hospital. Because like I cannot help but smile when founders say like, "Oh, we're gonna build it and we're gonna sell it to the hospital." Oh, that's not how it works. Like you need to get a reimbursement code, you need to find a DME provider, and then you can get it into the hospital. If we are talking about the US, for other countries, it works in a different way.
Wow.
So I think this is just a work that should be done by founders.
So here's the big question, Lisa. We are talking since some time about this complex process to get a product on the market. We all agree that it's complex, that there might be setbacks, that it's a long and windy road, but we didn't talk about what this process actually looks like. What's the different steps that you have when you start a project until you finally get it on the market? Can you give us, please, a very simple overview of what to expect?
Of course. So let's imagine that tomorrow you're waking up and you have an idea and you're going to build a medical device. First thing you should do is you should understand the value of that. So you need to go in field and interview doctors and interview patients. And if you have someone from insurance, you should also talk to them. You should gather all the statistics about the trauma or conditions that you're trying to address with this device. You should understand where is the pain point, because again, I'm talking about the US because it's the biggest market for us. It's all about money. You need to understand what complications are affecting insurance the most, and can you do something about these complications? Can you like maybe save some money for the insurance? And if the answer is yes.
I'm sorry. I just want to touch on something really quick here, because this is fascinating to me. You're saying that these companies, it's more practical to sell them to the insurance companies than it is to, a direct healthcare provider, or a hospital or something like that. It makes more sense to say, hey, insurance companies have all the money and they're paying for the services on these, so market to that.
Well, you cannot. I mean, I would not say that like you cannot completely, but I would say it's extremely hard to sell to the hospital.
Okay.
Because to receive money, how you do that? You need to receive a reimbursement code. It's all very regulated space. If you're not selling it like out of counter and then like your grandma can go and buy one in the pharmacy, and you're talking about some heavy medical equipment that should be installed in the hospital, then you
Right.
need to obtain reimbursement code. And if your device is innovative, you need to go through clinical trials to prove that it's actually necessary to have this device, that you're not building something, useless.
Right. You're not going to make an electronic band-aid. That doesn't make sense, right?
Correct, because there would be like no improvement, or maybe it would be like you'll figure out in clinical trials.
So that's step number one. You analyze the product, the problem, the market,
Yes.
all those things.
Understand the value. It's a step one. Understand the value.
Understand the value. Either you feel that it will not work and then you stop there, or things look bright. You go to step number two, which is
you come to me and we build you proof of concept. So we build you a proof that what you have in mind is actually physically possible. It's a prototype. It's ugly, but it's working.
Okay, so we come to you for a prototype, but at this point we don't analyze ourselves. So you're not doing the analyzed part.
No.
Okay. So okay, nice. So we have this proof of concept thanks to you. Then what's the next step?
You take this proof of concept and you go fundraise, or you go show it to the industry and receive some feedback. And everyone says it's amazing. And then you prove it to yourself and to others that yes, what you're building is a good idea, then you're building again with me. You're calling me again, saying like, "Hey, Lisa, great job. Let's keep it going."
But at this point, will we know how much we need to fundraise?
I would say so. Yes,
Yes. Okay.
you can figure it out. Like we can give you an estimate on how much would it take to build this, like as in the production line, but you also would think about other expenses. So you come to us, we build you design for manufacturing. So design for manufacturing is like another prototype, but also that looks exactly like the one that you would get from a production line.
Mm.
And we build you, let's say, 5 or 10 devices. And that's where it gets interesting. So while we're building this, you as a founder should find a so-called champion. It's a doctor who believes in you and believes in your idea, and you should convince him to run your clinical trials. So together with this champion, you gather like another doctors who are interested and who want to participate, and you have to figure out how to engage people to participate in your clinical trials. And I'm not talking about some complex heavy equipment when you first do clinical trials in animals or in cadavers or something. I'm keeping it simple. Yeah.
Mm.
So you're gathering the team to start a clinical trial. And once you have all these devices that we built for you, you go to the facility, and then for another, let's say 2 years, you're going through clinical trials. Oh, and before that, something that we've done, not you, but we've done when you just came to us with the idea, we are taking a look at the FDA regulation. And we're trying to understand how to build this device to comply with all the requirements. So if, let's say, simple example, a floor scale, right? I have one in my bathroom and it's not regulated because I'm using it for myself. But if the same scale I put in a hospital and I would measure a newborn baby, then it becomes a medical device. So regulation is also tricky. And in the beginning, we should figure out which class of the devices is going to be. Do you actually need to be classified? Maybe you can sell it as a wellness device, you know? So
Interesting.
by this time, you already have FDA in place. You need to set up so-called quality management system, which is required by FDA. Set up a production line, produce the device, and then start clinical trials. And in clinical trials, you should prove that patient outcomes are significantly changed. And this significantly is also a tricky part, because if you're making a little bit of improvement, then it's probably useless. So you need to make a significant improvement. And very often it happens that you're making a bit of improvement to every patient outcome. And it's very hard to prove the usefulness of this device that you're building. So you need to focus on one complication.
Okay, yeah. So I guess that was my next question. So you're saying that it is more beneficial for the process to be very niche down in the kind of impact that you're trying to have on a well-being factor, right? I mean, because I guess that makes sense, right? If you're building another scale and it's just adding a zero to the amount of intricacy that you can get into the amount of weight that you can measure. I don't know how precise you need to measure a baby, but I'm sure it's already in use, right? There's no point in making it even more precise. But if you have something that can, measure the infant, but also measure, I don't know, pulse ox, heart rate, things of that nature, it adds dimensions to the care that you're providing, which makes it more valuable.
I would say you should either save money or time with your
Oh,
device.
okay. Interesting. So
But in terms of hospital, like time is also money. So money.
that's entirely fair. I'm sure there's at least a couple of stressed out nurses and doctors out there that agree with you. But on top of that, so you get these multiple dimensions of cost. At least I'm trying to understand it from a financial point of view, because you handle most of the understanding of cost for the manufacturing and regulation side, right? So you're making sure that everything is FDA compliant, or essentially wherever they're trying to, whatever country they're trying to have um, their device in. But then on top of that, I'm sure there's all sorts of other things that have to go into this business that maybe the founder might not be aware of. Do you have any kind of areas that you see founders kind of fall apart on in terms of not building that into their process, not building that into their plan?
I noticed that most of founders are underestimating how pricey clinical trials might be.
Oh,
So after the
interesting.
COVID, we finally noticed that this process is not as comprehensive as it should be. So now there is like a lot of changes that happened after
Hmm.
COVID in the process of clinical trials. And you need to have a really diverse patient population, and you need to
Hmm.
do marketing for them. So you need to get them on board and convince them to participate. And you also have to have a good statisticians, mathematicians, and other people who would analyze the data that you're collecting.
Oh, you
Oh, so
mean that since the COVID, the requirement for a clinical trial to be valid has been strengthened?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
wow. So it's not just the doctor who's doing the study. It's the people keeping track of the data. It's the quality of the entire package that's now up to the founder to say, okay, yes, we have all these boxes ticked off. Interesting. So, I want to talk a little bit more about clinical trials because I think most people have a general idea of what they are, and I think I understand well. But in terms of kind of giving us the background view, a clinical trial is just when a healthcare provider or some kind of, I assume, healthcare professional is testing out the product, right?
Typically, you have two groups.
Okay.
You have one group that is using old method, and other group that is using your innovative method. And then
Mm,
you're trying to compare the result. So before clinical trial starts, you have an assumption. You have a list of patients' outcomes, and you say, like, I would affect these three outcomes and I would improve them somehow, right? Or I
mm,
would target this certain complications. And I am sure that with our device, this complication is going to be like 50% less.
oh, okay.
So then you get people into the clinical trials, and half of them goes to blind group, and other half goes into group that use the device. So like old method of treatment and new method of treatment, and then you compare the results.
Interesting. Okay. So when you boil it down, it's not just a test of the device, but it's a measurement against something that is working in that same function or that same capacity.
Well, let's put us like as an example.
Mm,
So let's say a bone fracture. So someone broke a leg, you come to hospital, and you say like typically there's a certain probability then they're going to be like non-union, for example, like your leg would not be your bone would not stick together after a while
ouch.
as it should. Yeah.
Oh no, I didn't know that was a thing, but that sounds painful.
Or you would be in pain longer than usual. You'll experience prolongated pain, or there would be like some other complication. And then we were saying like, oh, but there is like at home rehabilitation device
Mm,
that might decrease the chance of the complication. And it's in
okay.
clinical trials now. Do you want to try? So you sign up for clinical trials, and you take this device and you go through this like process. And then we collect the data of people like using this new innovative way of treatment
Mm,
and trying to understand, let's say in 3 months or in 1 year, is there a chance that we actually reduce the complication for them or not really? So you're not like just having a person on board, you also typically have a commitment for like for a year or sometimes for 2 years after the trauma to understand if we actually made a difference or not.
Wow.
And this echoes what you said before, that it should have significant improvements to be to
Yes.
pass the tests. I guess that's what this champion doctor is all about. You need to find someone who understands the field enough to know what would be a significant improvement, and who believe that the product that you're developing is actually able to reach this state.
Doctor can help here, but who would help the most is someone from the insurance side or statistician. Because when I'm talking
Oh.
about significant change, it's not a significant outcome for you as a patient. It's a significant outcome for the insurance. So we're saying that, look, if this guy not gonna heal, you're gonna you will have to pay for next surgery for him. So there's a
Oh.
significant cost, and we're gonna decrease the probability. Now, how much? If it's
Yeah.
like 30% decrease, then it's probably a good shot.
But do
Interesting,
you
because
know?
I
Oh.
sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Do you know, when you are starting to think about those clinical trials and the product development, do you already have in mind what's the kind of improvement that would be considered significant? An idea of the target or the goal that you need to reach?
You have to set it up before clinical trials. It's an assumption. It's an assumption you have to prove.
Does it happen often that you test the product, but the clinical trials shows that the improvement is not good enough?
Yeah, it happens.
Okay.
Well, then you try to either address like another outcome. So maybe you figured out something on the way, or you should just agree that, well, there should be like another business model for you or another way
Mm.
to the market, not the one that involve this specific clinical trial.
Wow.
That's
So
also
I guess
happened,
now,
unfortunately.
we are really talking about this long and windy road. Can you give us an estimate of what's the, let's say, the overall product probability that a product passes this test? Is there any rule of
Well,
thumb here?
I I can't. I mean, from my experience and my perception, I would
Ah.
say 80% would pass because if you
Oh, okay.
survive,
Okay, that's
Mm.
like,
better than
but
what I thought.
Oh yeah,
again,
oh, yeah.
but like,
Me too.
it's again, it's just like my perception. I worked with what 150 medical devices only. It's just a small amount if we're talking globally, right? So I
Mm.
don't know the statistics.
So yours are superior by far, is what I'm hearing now. But no, that's so interesting because I think one of the big things that I see when I talk to founders and I work with, um, products that might not have gone the way they wanted to, is that there's a usually a point where they can pivot into something that's slightly different or slightly, it's the same product, but it's a different use case. And would you find that that's more Apple like does that happen in the medical devices realm, or is it more okay if the trial doesn't go well, then you have to change it and then continue going into the trial? Like for example, if the device that I was building didn't do well at a trial, but it had a supposition that I had, but it changed something really fundamentally in a different area that might not be so highly regulated. Again, a consumer product that is still a medical device. It's more of a brace than it is like a what we would consider like a formalized medical device, and it can be sold in stores. Is that Does that happen often in your experience?
There is just like one example I can recall briefly
Oh wow.
is
Okay.
when I mean, again, like from my experience,
Right.
because
Right.
it's like apparently there are more.
Mm.
Well, first of all, it's something that you should do because once again, we're getting back to what we started the conversation with. You have this massive pressure that you've spent a lot of years of your life building this, and you actually fundraise a lot of money, and you cannot just like simply give up. You have to figure it out now at this point.
Mm.
But one example that I want to share. So it's another orthopedic device for, let's say, at-home rehabilitation, something that would track the motion of the leg and give some feedback to the user. So when they started clinical trials, after a while, they noticed that the outcomes are not meeting their expectations, but they noticed something else, that they can figure out the correlation between the implant and the brand of implant that was installed in the knee and
Oh,
recovery process. So they basically collected the data to understand which implants are better. And then they sold company for this data, not for the outcome or improvement for the patient.
Oh.
So
oh, interesting.
I would call it a pivot, yeah. So
Yeah, I mean that's a huge pivot, right? But that even if that's a rare use case, that's a very interesting way to do it, right? It's going from like a B2C model to a B2B.
oh,
I,
medical devices are always B2B.
well, oh yeah, I mean, I assume. I guess it's more just like who benefits, the overall consumer or a business?
Yeah, if consumer benefits, you just sell it out of counter, like
Yeah.
you don't have to go through clinical trials. You have to prove that insurance is benefiting.
It all comes back to money, right?
I'm sorry to say that. Is it too cynical? I mean,
Well, here's the thing, right? If you do the right thing for the wrong reason, is it still, is it still wrong or is it right or is it? I think ultimately, regardless of how we do this, a lot of people probably benefited by the devices that you're creating and the businesses that hire your company to make them, right? So even if money is an intrinsic factor for that, and even a motivation, it's really nice to hear that there are businesses out there like yours that really put a lot of pride in not just in what they do, but the impact that they're making.
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, all right. So we are beyond the step of the clinical trials. Let's assume we pass those tests. We are in the 80%. We can champagne and knows the FDA approval.
We already have it to start clinical trial.
Oh, this is before the clinical trials.
So yeah, the one I'm talking about. Now you have to get a reimbursement code. So you
So
have
we keep
to
hearing that. What is a reimbursement code and why is it so important?
imagine you're a photographer.
Okay.
So you're coming to a studio where you rent the space. And imagine you don't have your own camera. So you have a camera in the studio. And
Mm,
to take pictures of a client, you're taking this camera and taking a picture, right?
hmm
So now let's translate it into like a hospital. So the camera is your device, like medical device. And every
mm.
time you use it, the person who produced this camera is getting paid with
Oh,
reimbursement code.
gotcha.
So the studio, which is a hospital, is
Mm.
charging insurance every time the camera is used. And then
Oh.
insurance is paying to you as to like a person who designed this camera. So to get this reimbursement code, which is a HCPCS code I'm referring to for medical
Mm,
devices, you have to prove the significant outcome. And there is another
Oh,
way to be charged. So every time you come into hospital and nurse is like taking your measurement, right? And you're checking you
mm,
in, or doctor is like talking to you and putting notes in the computer. There is a CPT code for that. So there's another reimbursement code.
mm.
Every action of the doctor is also getting reimbursed. So like they are paid for that. But there
Right.
is a limit. So typically there are
Oh.
like 5 reimbursement codes per visit. Or depends on the type of procedure. Like I would say
Mm.
typically. So hospitals would not do like weird iterations with you over and over to charge you more, to charge insurance more, right? In your case.
Well, that's nice to hear.
So
I hope.
there's also like a certain regulation, which is like
Mm.
flexible based on what condition you are and so on, but it's designed in a way that it's really hard to overuse this type of procedures.
Fascinating. So essentially there's a supply chain of revenue that's going through the hospital, then the insurance, and then ultimately to the creator of the medical device, and it's all tracked by that code.
By different codes, but yes.
Oh, different. Well, I guess one code leads to another, which leads to another, all the way back to,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, interesting. So we went through trials, we got the code, and that's the end all be all, right? That
I hope.
I.
Pretty much. Now you just have to go out there and convince the insurance to install these devices in certain hospitals which they're partnering with. And that's how you start the process of entering the market. Or you can go to some companies like Kaiser Permanente,
Mm,
like in California, who are both hospital and insurance together. So they're
mm.
like a bit easier to make a decision about implementing your device in their ecosystem. Then you start selling it.
Okay, so the selling doesn't even happen until the exact end of the process. It's
Absolutely. This is what the
wow.
trickiest part here. That's why I'm saying like it takes 7 years to bring the product to the market. It's not because like it's so extremely hard to
Whoa.
build one. It's because it's hard to prove that what you're building is required by the world. Like it's necessary.
So when you reach this last step, you're sure that you gonna be able to sell it? You will find buyers, right?
You would
Either any
feel
guarantee or anything.
you are very confident at this point. Likely, you were not just like sitting there and waiting for the clinical trial to end. You would just like talk in the industry and negotiate and find some partners. And you talk to DME providers. These are companies who are like putting, they call durable medical equipment, right? So they're putting devices into hospitals.
Oh,
So, like, you need to find a
So
way
so
to the
you
market.
so you mean that you receive many signals along the way while you're doing all this process, so that when you reach this place, you can indeed be very confident about the commercial success.
I think so, yes.
I
Okay.
I would hope so. I mean, my little business development heart, it would not survive 7 years of just waiting, and then finally someone says go, and then you're off to the market, right? I'm sure you're out there talking to doctors, talking to insurance reps and hospitals, and saying like, oh yeah, we have these really cool device that's in trials, and we're getting close to the end. We have this kind of runway, but it does seem like a massive process that is almost contrary to most other kind of products that you would take to market, right? Because you start with a concept and you shop it around first. You say you go to, your Walmart or your user base and say, "Oh, we have this really cool product and really cool idea. Do you want to try it out, test it, get to know it?" But in this case, once it reaches your target demo, it's gone through so many iterations and so many hands and so many trials that it feels almost backwards. But that's for safety, I assume, for the benefit of the people that ultimately get
Yes,
this device.
this entire system was designed to protect the customer, to protect the patient, after all, right? And to be sure that if this is already in a hospital, that was tested. And the part that you're saying that you're coming and offering people to test it, you should do this all the time, but you're not always can test some, let's say, invasive devices right away
Mm.
for
I
obvious
wondered.
reasons.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
I hope not. I don't want to, walk into a hospital and someone says, "Oh, I just built this yesterday. Do you want to give it a shot and shove it in my body?" That
Absolutely.
that feels
Yes.
that feels not so comfy to think about. But
Yes. It's
wow.
like now another example that I'm saying, like we're working now on this smart colonoscopy device, right? AI
Mm,
powered. So like it would navigate itself. So the future, should start somewhere. You don't want
wow.
to be tested
Yeah.
like
Lisa,
that.
here's a question. I have a background in software engineering, and what's really cool in software engineering is that we can iterate very fast for updates of products, and we can typically in a matter of minutes we can put a new version on the market. once you have your medical product, can you continue to improve it like with tiny steps, tiny improvements, or do you have to go through the whole process every time you want to change anything?
That's a good point.
That's a very tricky part. So now there is a way to understand about how to regulate some AI-based products because the software part is not fixed for them.
Oh yeah.
So,
Mm.
but in general, that's why you should work with someone like me or someone who has experience in the field, because once you already have this design for manufacturing, you typically cannot change it. So you
Mm.
need to have it done and let's say frozen, or you need to go through entire clearance process again if you change like a smaller detail in that.
Wow. So there must be like a startling amount of kind of confidence in your product before you take it to trial. Because once it's in the pipeline,
Ooh.
that's it, right? You would have
Correct.
to just do it all over again if for some reason something didn't work in it.
Yes, pretty much.
And even with software updates.
You
Yeah.
you mean the firmware update of the device?
Yeah. Yeah.
So um, that's a bit different. Well, I'm referring to like the hardware part of it. So hardware parts
Mm.
cannot be changed. Typically,
Oh.
for firmware, it's a little bit more flexible.
Okay,
Okay.
interesting. Yeah. So you can still update some things, but you cannot update the physical part of the device.
Yes.
Well, I mean, there are so many iterations you probably go through in terms of building the hardware before you take it to trial. Do you find that it is kind of like one draft and done, or is there like just drawers and drawer or like files and files and files of different minuscule changes that you put before you bring it to a client?
I'm not quite sure. It depends on the case. Well, let me give you just an idea. How long
Mm-hmm.
does it take to build a device? So typically, when someone comes with the idea to us without a prototype or something, it takes 5,000 hours of work of my team and year and a half of time, because sometimes you just
Mm-hmm.
like cannot work faster. You have to wait for, let's say, molds to be done or some certain testing to be done, so you cannot accelerate it. Typically it's like year and a half, and if we're talking about the price, it's approximately 400,000, something like
Oh
this, for
wow.
the client to design from zero to production line.
And that wait, is that including the actual manufacturing or is it just design?
Design and setting up the manufacturing.
And setting. Okay, okay.
Yeah, so
I
you
was
you
about to
would
say.
receive the device itself designed in a way how you thought about it. If it's like some, let's say, I have a case study in my LinkedIn page about the smart pill dispenser
Mm.
that was designed to be used with opioids,
Oh,
and we have to make control of the entire system. We have to understand that the person is using it as it was prescribed, that this person is
right.
not selling medicine to someone else. So we have the fingerprints, sensor, and so on. So this device took year and a half and 400K in design and production.
Wow. Okay, so that's a pretty significant dead time and value dedication to, I guess, the design that's leading up to the trial.
Yes.
And so meaningful because I've heard and I read data about how addiction to opioids are so widespread all around the world. It's something that takes a lot of space. We don't hear about it a lot, and it's so easy to get addicted because when you start to take it as a medication, of course there is the effect is first quite strong, but then it can get lower and you might want to use another pill, and that's how you can get addicted. So wow,
Well,
it's
you bring up an interesting point too, because there must be so many risks associated to these devices or at least devices that have intrinsic risks like that, um, you must have a lot of engineers not just playing around with how to design it and create it, but also what might go wrong, right? I mean, Jeff, you call it red team on the cybersecurity side, right? So do you guys do a equivalent engineering red team?
Oh.
Absolutely, yes. We're trying to figure out where it all can go wrong. That is why it also like takes some time and takes a
Mm.
lot of efforts from an engineering team.
Have you ever, I mean, I'm sure all of your devices are perfect and nothing has ever gone horribly wrong, right? But uh in terms of in terms of the possibilities for risk, uh I assume in the industry you must know of some crazy of things that came to light maybe even after trials, right? Can you think of anything um that would pop out of your mind in that respect?
You know, surprisingly, I would say no,
Oh,
because
that's great to hear.
typically,
Thank you.
typically you figure out that something is off at the moment when you design it and test it. You're not like
Mm.
uh, just letting it go out there. Yeah. So the most weird stories I've heard is that clinical trials were falsified for no
Oh.
specific reason, but like it's
Oof.
another story,
No
right?
reason.
I imagine
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that's insane story. I actually we also put together an article about it. So one guy in Japan was coming up with like just random results for his clinical trials for 20 years just out of fun,
Oh my
and then
goodness.
someone figured it out like way later, and guess what happened next? Like nothing. So well, but well,
Uh,
that's a unique case. Okay, so that typically
yeah.
doesn't happen.
Okay, I
And
was about to say it's not your
So
industry is
this is a
not rampant with fraud, right? That's
this
not.
is a part of the interview that we're gonna cut,
Yeah.
obviously.
okay, 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 okay.
No, but listen,
Maybe
I'm
not.
just saying it's good. It's good that there aren't like exploding pacemakers out there. But um, so that's so interesting. So I mean, I guess it goes back to the idea that there are so many parts that you wouldn't really consider are super important, like who's keeping track of your data and like
Hmm.
how reliable not just the data is, but the person keeping that data is. Um, so there must be a lot of security that goes into building your team.
Yes, and that is why, again, this industry is super regulated. And there are a lot
Mm.
of standards involved in the process of design, and even labeling of medical devices have its own standards. So what you put, this all tiny signs on the package, they're all regulated. So to pass the FDA, it all should comply with the standards.
Wow, that's fantastic. I mean, well, that's great for me to hear since in case I need one. Um, again, I'm not going to have an exploding. I'm not going to go into an MRI and it's just going to collapse around me, right? That would not be great. Uh, but I think we're coming up on time here. We have a lot that we discussed, a lot of really interesting points, a lot of complexities that you made very simple, and thank you so much for that. I want to cap off this last section with something that I like to kind of toy around in my head with. It's is there something about your industry, your job, your company in specific that you feel like others should really know about? It can be something like explaining a preconception or something along the lines of, oh, there's this really cool thing that not too many people know, but it exists. I want to know what you could tell all of our viewers uh, if we had a mic to 1 million people.
To a million people, so like not the ones who are about to build a medical device.
Yeah, because I think those ones you have a pretty good market on, but just anyone in general who's curious about the medical healthcare tech space, or just anyone who listens to this and says, "Oh, maybe I should check out OVA."
Well, I think that something that I see often is the founders are underestimating that impact that they're making with their device should be expressed in money, because
Mm,
a lot of founders are less cynical in the beginning of the way. So they think that if the patient gonna be happy, then they're building something great. But it's not how it works, unfortunately. So
mm,
in countries like Singapore, where they measure quality of life, and this is an outcome, like, right, quality of life,
mm,
it might work. But if we're talking about the United States, the outcome should be measured in money, after all.
mm.
So this is something to empathize on. So this is a business, it's not a charity. It wasn't very
Oh,
inspirational, wasn't it?
No,
oh,
you know
but
what?
I think it's very interesting because that's I guess that's something that comes really often, and you
Mm,
can waste a lot of time if you try to do it in a way that doesn't work.
absolutely. And
Absolutely,
So
yes.
people need to be aware of it.
you know what? And this is something that I work with all the time with mission-driven businesses is there is this kind of paradigm that you have to either help people or make money. And it's almost never both. But you work in an industry in a particular niche that has the capability to do both, but you need to be smart about how it's done, right? The idea isn't, yeah, you can maybe change the quality of life for a lot of people, but if it doesn't have a financial impact, it's going to be near impossible to get it through the process. So if you can qualify both sides of that coin, um, there's no limit to your success. And you joked about it not being too inspirational, but I think the opposite. I think if you go into this understanding the difficulty of the financial portion, you can have your dream, you can have your quality of life, and a financial impact just as well. But you have to remember that the financial impact is what you're graded on.
Thank you for phrasing it way better than I did. I like it.
That's an
uh,
amazing message. To close this interview, Lisa, there is a question that I like to ask every guest. It's a little bit in the spirit of the question that you just answered. Let's see if the message will be different. If you have 2 minutes to share a message with everyone on earth of today, but also everyone of the future generations, what would you say?
I don't want to sound like I'm trauma dumping here or something, but since I'm originally from Ukraine, I've been always underestimating what is the war. So before full scale war started, I was always thinking, like, okay, war is something that happens with poor people somewhere. I mean, I don't know, not with me.
mm,
And I remember it very clearly. So I happened to be abroad. I was traveling when the war started. And first days, I've been nervous because I just bought an apartment in Kiev.
mm,
And I was thinking, like, okay, it's just gonna be like for 1 week. So please don't touch my apartment. Um, but then it was hit by a missile and I
oh wow.
reconstructed it. But what I'm saying is, then it doesn't matter because it was the feeling in me for first week. After that, I was thinking, let my family and my friends be a live place. So now I was happy enough to convince my family to move out from Ukraine. But that's another thing I've been hearing all the time when people are saying, like, oh, there's a war there. Why you're not moving? Well, fucking
Yeah.
because, like, you have the entire family history in this house. You cannot just move. You're
Mm,
not renting. That's a place where you have attachment with your childhood, where you have attachment with all the memories. So you
it's
tie
home.
to it, like, yeah, more than you thought. So I don't know if that's possible, but war is so useless and so unnecessary. And
Mm.
amount of people who's benefiting from war is so minor, really.
Mm.
So like, I mean, it's so obvious, and everyone is saying that they're like pro peace and against war and so on, but war is still happening. So if future generation would figure out a way of not making war, that would be amazing. So that would be probably my message, even though I'm not sure if it's actually possible, because I believe it's a part of humans' nature. And it was a huge surprise for me to figure out that the most valuable thing I have in my entire house, where I spent my childhood, which was like such a sacred place, that I was not even inviting my friends to, because it was like, my house, of house of
Mm.
my grandparents. My mom lived there. So the most valuable thing was, can you guess what? It was a photo album of my family. So
Oh,
it's the only thing that we cared about, and we took it and we have it in our new home abroad, and we live in
Oh.
now as immigrants. But this is the only thing that mattered after all.
oh wow,
So
that's beautiful.
I wish someone would not experience that. Because like war in Ukraine is almost 1,000 days right now, right? And I mean, I'm counting it all wrong. The invasion started like in 2014, and everyone ignored it and let it go. And I was the one of this like people who were just ignoring it. But full scale war started approximately 1,000 days ago, and now I think it's evident that it was so unnecessary. So if there is a way, if there is a startup who can come up with the solution on how to stop the war, that would be terrific.
Listen, a startup for world peace would be incredible, but as cynical as that statement sounds, I think people like yourself, like the great innovators that are making awesome products and awesome businesses every day. Once upon a time, flying was impossible. It was just we don't have wings. Once upon a time, going to space was never something that we could even dream of, but we've been there and back. I think with enough people who care about each other, we can make the impossible possible. So
Oh
thank you
yeah.
so much for sharing that. That was I'm so glad we're not doing the
They
visual
didn't
because
expect
you would
that.
see me wiping away a tear there when you were talking about your family's photo album. But
Thank you
no,
for sharing.
it was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Lisa,
Yeah, thank you guys for inviting me.
is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners?
Once again, like as we redesigned, well, we have a reason to redesign the vision of our company, because again, war started. You don't have to wait for some disaster to start for you to redesign your life, or rethink your goals, or to understand where you want to be in 10 years and in 50 years, right? Because it's really changed your mind when you start thinking like, where I want to come in 50 years, because it feels like half a life, even
Mm.
more than a half of a life. So that may adjust your vision and the goals for the life. And once it's really clear for you, then everything becomes so easy, and you yourself becomes untouchable, not fragile. So because you have this vision, you have this passion, you cannot hurt.
Powerful stuff. Really, I don't think I could have said it better myself. Lisa, thank you so much for spending this time with us,
Thank you
talking
very
to our
much.
listeners about, your work, your life. I know I was thoroughly fascinated by everything, and I'm sure a lot of other people will be as well.
Can you remind us how to find you online, how to reach out to you, and how to work with you?
Of course. So the easiest way is to find me on LinkedIn, but I also have TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, everything you said.
We will put the link
Which we will link with this.
to all those media in the description of this episode.
Absolutely.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
so
you,
much.
guys.
And we'll be back with the next professional. Catch us next time.
Bye bye.
Bye.